Stop making fake data tables. Your next AP Biology graphing and data analysis activity might already exist in community science data. Hi, I'm Miss Parrott, and in today's video we're going to be looking at how to use community science data or citizen science data to make authentic graphing and data analysis practice for your AP Biology students. Community science data is amazing because it gives us raw material for real, true AP style thinking. And it allows students to participate in real science. Today we're going to be looking at 3 specific sources of data that you can use. There are so many, but we're going to be focusing on 3, what kind of data they provide and how to access that data, along with how you as a teacher can make resources for your students that will actually help them in their, with real AP Bio tasks that help them with their, FRQ number 2s and all the other data analysis that comes with AP Biology. Let's get into it. All right, my first one is iNaturalist. It's my favorite. Me and iNaturalist have been great friends for about 8 years now. And it allows us to look at species observations by location and date. Types of data that you can find on iNaturalist include biodiversity, invasive species data, species distribution, phenology, which is plant life cycles, and all kinds of other ecology questions can be answered with data from iNaturalist. To access the data, all you need is an iNaturalist account, which only requires an email. And then you're going to go to the Explore or the Export page and find Export Observations as a CSV spreadsheet. Then use the filters so that you get just the data that you want. Now, for any of this data through this whole video, the kinds of things you as the teacher want to do is provide a targeted question, have them use the data to make a graph, and you can make that, you can tell them the type of graph or not, or you can give them as much guidance on that depending on how far into the year you are, how much of the range you want them to have. You can have them then describe trends that they see in the data and also discuss limitations of community science data in general. So types of questions, targeted questions that data from iNaturalist can provide or would be like, how have brown anole observations changed in Florida over time? Or does observed monarch activity vary by month in our region? The data is there. They can easily answer those questions. Now, the second source is eBird, which is brought to us by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. So tons and tons of bird data. Another source for bird data would be the Audubon annual Christmas bird count. So here you're going to find tons of bird observations, data about their occurrence, abundance, and migration patterns. So again, specific data types that you can have students look at could be migration timing, species occurrence in a certain area, seasonal abundance, so how the abundance of a population changes over the seasons, habitat patterns, and then fundamentals like date and location, but also tons of other metadata is available on eBird. To access the data, they'll need to go to the eBird observational data set. Now, this is a lot, so use your filters, teachers. You don't just want to throw students into millions of lines of data. That defeats the purpose of this activity, all right? You can also go ahead and use a pre-made eBird bar chart or histogram, or you can pre-filter the data for your students. That helps them focus because a lot of times students think that everything on the page matters and they are still not fluent in finding what data matches their question. So that's why we do this, to practice those skills. Questions that you could answer or investigations you could propose to your students using eBird data would be like, how does the frequency of red-winged blackbird observations change across months in 2 different regions? So you could do one farther east or west, or on one part of a river or another part of a river, north or south. And for all of these, again, you want to have them describe the data, predict why we see a difference. If we do see a difference in the data, you could have them calculate whether the difference is significant or not. And then what are the limitations, again, of using community science data to help answer an investigation question. The third source is focused on plants. And so that's Nature's Notebook, or the USA-NPN, which is put out by the USA Phenology Network. Again, phenology is plant life cycle data. Now, yes, plant life cycle data is there, but you can also find information on climate, community interactions. So this could be feeding interaction, or it could be symbiotic interaction with different pollinators and things like that. And also information on seasonal timing. To access the data, you'll go to the Phenology Observation Portal, and from there you can download customized data sets from the National Phenology Database and Nature's Notebook. They have data going all the way back to 2009 to the present, so there's plenty of data for you to work with there. Questions that you could ask using data from this source might be, how does flowering time vary across years in one specific region? Or, does first leaf date for red maple differ across latitudes? That would be a great question for students to dive into the data and find the answer to. Again, there are so many more resources like OSearch if you want to do sharks or sea turtles or other large marine life, and there's tons out there, and maybe I'll do a whole list of cool places to find citizen science information. But what we want to focus on now as teachers is, okay, how do I turn these data tables into actual tasks that are going to help my students be better biologists and perform well on the AP Bio exam? So first, you want to ask a question, filter it, simplify the data, have them graph, claim, and describe the limitations. So when you give the students a question, it needs to be narrow. So we can't just be like, what can we learn about birds? Too broad. But you could ask, is there a relationship between data set 1, A, and B, right? Data set 2. And then it could make a scatter plot and determine if there is, in fact, a line of best fit and if there is some sort of relationship or not. Or how does observation frequency change over time? These are narrower questions. So once you've kind of narrowed the question, you want to filter it. So you want to filter by species. I would choose species that are relatable to the students in your population. So I live in coastal Florida, so we want to be picking things that our kids see all the time. So like brown anoles, that is a super common invasive species, but it's everywhere. Or dolphins, or something that actually matches where you live. And then time. So do you want to ask your question over the course of years or months or seasons or weeks? Region. So you might want to be, as specific as like a city or a county, or you could do your whole state, or if you're part of a geographical region, it could be that whole region. And be sure that you target your question to just one variable. Next, you're still going to have, even after you filter for all those things, the raw data is going to be a lot more than you actually need to answer your question. And students aren't great at figuring out what matters and what doesn't. So you're going to have to go through as the teacher and simplify to just the data that's going to matter to help them answer the question. As they get more proficient, maybe you add other data that could be a distractor, because AP Biology likes to do that too. But not at the beginning. Maybe not even at the middle. Maybe not to the very end. So then you want to, once you have your data table, You want to design a student task using the AP biology language that they're going to see on the AP bio exam. So have them construct a graph. And maybe at the beginning, you want to tell them what type of graph will go with this data. But then over time, as they start to learn the difference between categorical data and continuous data and the different types of graphs, they have to make that choice for themselves. And so all the parts that are part of constructing a graph, they have to do that. Then have them describe the pattern or the trends they see in the data. If the data allows, involve some sort of calculation or for mean, change over time, percent change, etc. Or if there are different regions, see if the differences are statistically significant or not. Also, you want to have students evaluate a claim or a prediction, and then identify a limitation or a source of error in the data. And since this is community science data, there is plenty of that out there. And so this is an important thing because the data isn't going to be beautiful. So speaking of non-beautiful data, let me just throw out there some teacher cautions. So some things for us to be mindful of as you're guiding your students through this data analysis process. Real data is powerful. It actually gives all these numbers a reason for being. But it's also messy. And if you have had students, as I have had students, and I have even been this student at times, let me admit, messy data makes, especially students that have a tendency towards perfectionism, it throws them off. They want one right answer. They want to get the right answer right so they can earn the points. This whole data analysis thing is something that's going to make some students uncomfortable in a growing way, okay? Because the data is messy. There may be some missing data points. There may be some duplicate data. The data may be not taken consistently. And a lot of kids don't know what to do with that. So you're gonna have to kind of guide them through that and help them be comfortable with being uncomfortable. There's also sampling bias. So for instance, if you're doing iNaturalist, a lot of observations are gonna be taken along trails, places where people actually go. So you may see a high population in one area and not another, but that's because there's no trails in that other place. It doesn't mean there's no birds or bugs or plants in that other place. That's just not where the people are there observing. Also, depending on the app, you're gonna have different people using that app, different people of different ages. The number of observers is gonna vary. Also, organisms that are large, flashy, and slow or easy to photograph are gonna have more observations than birds that move really quickly and too fast to get a good picture. So there is sampling bias, and that's okay as long as you know that that's a limitation. Some organisms also have privacy and location issues. So this is super, super important. There was a time early on in iNaturalist where people with questionable ethics were using, especially when it came to herps, snakes, turtles, etc. They were taking iNaturalist observations and then going and trying to take those organisms out of the wild and sell them as pets. Not cool. That's a whole discussion in its own. So some of the data on those more sensitive species may not be super precise. And so either pick a different organism or, again, state the limitations. It's in this county, but it's not going to tell you exactly where. Also, please remind students if you are having them add observations to iNaturalist, which I totally encourage, as long as their age matches that of what is required by the website. Don't tell them not to say, I found this in my backyard, and then tag their addresses for the location. Don't do that. So we don't want them to be sharing personal location data. They can stick to like the city or the county, and that's just fine. And then you want to teach the students to avoid overclaiming. And this is super important. So we don't want to say, this data proves, suggests. This data suggests. And definitely not to draw causation relationships, maybe correlation, but not causation. You can't say this causes this. And that's actually really okay and good, because having messy data, the limitations help you and the students to define what evidence, what claims their data actually does support and where the evidence is lacking, which is amazing. So remember, we want real data, a focused question, and that's going to lead students to AP style thinking. You don't need to invent fake data about random beetles that don't exist. You can use community science data in your classroom. Your job as the teacher is to come up with a focused question to help filter and clean the data set for the students, and then give them a clear AP style task. And you can scaffold this to become more and more complicated throughout the year. You can have them graph, describe, calculate, evaluate, and identify limitations as they go. And the assessment here is, can they perform all of these tasks accurately, confidently, and efficiently under time pressure, just like they would have to for an FRQ or some other part of the AP biology exam. AP style practice is key to success, but this community science data analysis is going to help them build tons of AP bio skills and can be done over and over again all year long. If you found this video helpful, please do give it a thumbs up, a like, subscribe to my channel. While I was making this video, I came up with about 5 other ideas for videos, so subscribe to my channel to see what comes next. Leave a comment, question, or an emoji down below, and I will be making resources, I will pre-filter some data for you to help you get started. And my Teachers Pay Teachers resources can be found at Know and Grow with Gnome, so please do check that out. Keep learning, keep growing, and we'll see you next time.